cream de la cream of VCs. And first one we have on board is Sandeep Murthy of Lightbox. Sandeep has been an investor for 15 years, has seen all kinds of ups and downs. Currently, the fund that he runs is a $400 million fund focused on early stage consumer technology businesses. The team behind Lightbox represents one of the most successful track records in VCs in India. Operating as Sherpalo, our investments included InMobi, ClearTrip, and Naukri.com. Current portfolio includes Furlenco, Rebel Foods, Droom, Flinto, and Melora. Portfolio company Imbibe was recently acquired by Reliance Jio. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sandeep and let him present and talk about himself as well as Lightbox. And after that, we'll start taking the questions. Thank you. Over to you, Sandeep.
Great. Thanks, Rajat. I thought I'd just, I'm actually, first of all, it's exciting to be a part of this. I think it's fantastic how the world has managed to shift to these virtual events, and I think hopefully we'll be able to get some good interaction here. And I'm excited to hear the types of questions and convey a little bit about what we're doing to the group as well. So in a nutshell, look, we're looking to build tech-enabled companies. If I just give an overview of how our fund operates, we operate a very small portfolio. So our current fund is about $209 million. We have about 8 companies in it. We invest very early and in exchange also take a relatively high ownership position because we anticipate spending a lot of time with the companies. Our intent is to be very involved. Our desire, our interests are to get deep into the companies. And to do that, you can't do that with a broad portfolio. And another fundamental aspect of the businesses we invest in is that data and technology are at the core of how they're building and what they're up to. Now, bringing it to India at a high level and some of the macro trends, as you mentioned, I've been doing this for the last 15 years. And I think over the last 3 or 4 years, call it age, call it just reflection, we begin to realize that the biggest impacts to consumption as we think about it going forward are actually environmental issues and social issues. If people are fighting for water, they're not going to be buying your shirts or your cars or your jewelry. And similarly, if they can't get jobs, if they're unemployed or underemployed, they're not going to have the resources to be able to do this. So understanding how your business falls on these parameters is really important. And it's a little bit of what I'd like to focus some of at least my opening thoughts on here today. On the environmental side, I guess there are varying views about is there in fact an environmental issue or not. But just to put some context around it, 10,000 years ago on the planet, it took about 6,000 years to add 80 parts per million of carbon to the atmosphere. Today, we're adding 2 parts per million of carbon every year. We're already at about 410 parts per million of carbon. By the time we get to 460, the Earth is pretty much toast. And so it's not going to happen on one fine day. It's going to happen gradually over time. And I do believe we're experiencing some of those effects right now. So being mindful of the impact that your business has on the environment is not just a socially responsible idea. I think it's an essential fact of what we need to think about. Now, similarly, as businesses think about how they want to build and what kinds of models they're going to emulate and follow, it's important to bear in mind that while today we're in a reasonable position in India in terms of our share of global greenhouse gas emissions, that if we were to consume the same way that the US does, or if everybody on the earth consumes the same way the US does, it would take 7 Earths to meet that demand. And so in essence, what we have right now is a investment system and process that is demanding growth and growth in consumption across parameters with an environmental set of or ecological set of rules that are demanding some form of restraint and balance. Now, if these 2 rules continue to fight, it's clear that at some point the environmental rules are going to win because they fundamentally can't be changed. Now, on the social side, there's a variety of parameters to look at, but if we just take, for example, education, we have a shortage of over 1 million teachers in this country. So despite a 97% enrollment in grade 1, only 30% of students graduate grade 12. Now, technology can play a key role in this, and we've seen that in some of the things that Imbibe has done, as you mentioned earlier in our portfolio, and many other companies are doing. How exactly it executes and implements it, I don't know, and which ones will win, I'm not necessarily claiming to opine on today, but I do believe that these are issues that need to be considered. Similarly, as new business models come about, I think they need to be considerate and mindful of the people involved in executing them and ensuring that they're making their lives better and improving the ultimate opportunities that are being presented to them. And I think there are ways to balance this. And I think that over time, models will be refined to allow for it. But it's something, again, that everyone needs to be mindful of. Now, whether or not, again, you decide to incorporate these environmental and social parameters into how you think about your business, I do believe at some point the government will mandate it. We saw this in a very simple example with banning of single-use plastic. Whether people believed it was a good idea or not, it was probably a very smart environmental thought to have had from the beginning. But by virtue of the fact that the government mandated the banning of single-use plastic, it then forced businesses to reassess how exactly they would handle delivery. And we saw this in Rebel, and we've seen this in other businesses as well in our portfolio. So I think that it's not a question of just wanting to be good. It will get regulated into your business at some point. And hopefully in the next few slides, we'll talk a little bit about how it's actually good from a financial return standpoint as well to consider these parameters. So just a quick overarching thought on this. I know that investors tend to focus a lot on growth, but I think it's important for as entrepreneurs building businesses that you bear in mind the ideology that growth for the sake of growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. And in fact, that's not what we want our businesses to be. We need them to grow stronger, not fatter. And I thought this was just an interesting example of something we came across called the Do Black credit card. It's a climate-focused credit card that shuts down when users' purchases hit a certain carbon emission limit. Again, not necessarily a business that I know much about per se, but I think it's an interesting approach to how to think about self-regulation in a way by putting products in people's hands that can make that easier. Now, coming back to India, I think that one of the things we've become really good at here is inefficiency. We've actually mastered it. We've delivered it at scale. And I think that in that, quite honestly, is where opportunity exists. If everything were efficient and perfect, I don't think I'd have much of a job here. And I think as entrepreneurs, life would be a little bit more difficult. So this idea that we've actually have this as a challenge in front of us presents tremendous opportunity for us. The other reason why it's an interesting market and an interesting market for people to globally be thinking about is that the reality is 20% of the world's population will live here by 2024. And how this 20% consumes will have a big impact on how the world evolves and what impact it has on the world. So building businesses in a manner that is thoughtful and mindful of all of these issues, while also ensuring that you deliver a financial return, I think is incumbent upon us and is actually very important for everyone to be aware of so that we are actually going to make a difference in how the world evolves. Now, the other tagline for India, quite honestly, has been fragmentation, whether that's fragmentation of languages, fragmentation of political parties, fragmentation of culture, fragmentation of religion. And I think, in fact, what we've seen over the last 10 or 15 years, really probably I would say the last 10 years, and accelerated so in the last 5 years, has been that tech is really connecting this fragmented society. And that's playing out in the number of internet users. I'm assuming I'm really speaking to the choir here in terms of these numbers, that we have a large base of users here, and they're actually very engaged. If you look at their data consumption, it's extremely high, and that growth has taken place really over the last 4 years in a dramatic fashion. And I think with the investments coming in from large players in this market, I think that will only continue to accelerate. Now, coming to the consumer, consumers' decisions are being driven by 4 clear trends. They're looking for convenience. They want a relationship that's driven on trust. They want things that deliver affordability to them. And there's an aspiration in what they're looking to get. Now, I think these are important factors to keep in mind as we're building businesses. And I want to talk a little bit about a few of them right now. Aspiration is really driving consumption. And we really think about it as the brands of the future are really built at this intersection of affordability and aspiration. And we're finding that this aspiration is coming from even global players entering the market. And they're upping the standard of the quality of products that need to be created. And I think that that's a tremendous benefit to the consumer in the market. I think the other aspect of aspiration is really how it's evolved to go from just pure personal aspiration to social aspiration as well. So when a brand thinks about how it's going to connect with consumers on the metric of aspiration, it's not enough to show the consumer how cool they'll look or how in they'll be in a club. It's also important to speak to the consumer's desires to be on the right side of what's happening in society and look at the effect on the environment. Today, I think we have 8 of our cities that have encountered major disasters over the last year. I think that consumers want to know that brands are aware of this and are doing something hopefully to help with that. A great example of this is Patagonia. Patagonia's motto, or in fact, value system, is to leave the earth a better place. Now, you would think that would be in contrast with a business that needs to actually sell products and generate income, but they actually ran an ad in 2011 that said, "Don't buy this jacket," and they urged people to actually not buy it. In the humor of the situation is they actually had record sales that year, and they donated a large portion of the profits, or actually think all the profits from those sales, to environmental issues. So again, consumers are clearly siding with brands that understand and subscribe to this awareness of the world around them. Now, I just want to give 2 examples, one in the fashion industry. If you look at what it takes to produce a pair of jeans, it takes 1,800 gallons of water to grow enough cotton to produce just 1 pair of jeans. And 20% of global industrial water pollution can be tied to garment manufacturing. Now, this is happening in the backdrop of an industry that has grown up with fast fashion as its sort of motto. We've seen that a business like H&M, to generate about $5 billion in revenue, holds about $4.3 billion in inventory. Now, holding that much inventory in a business that's driven off of 52 micro seasons per year is going to create challenges. And those challenges actually result in nearly 13 million tons of clothing going into landfills every year. Now, Burberry, on the other hand, went a step further and actually lit on fire $300 million worth of inventory one year because they didn't want it sold in a secondhand market. So this gross negligence, I would say, of the environmental impact of what the models are perpetrating is leading people to actually opt to change how they want to buy. And in that, we found an interesting opportunity to look at custom clothing and actually personalized apparel for people, where you can source and hold no inventory, allow people to actually spend their time designing their own product. It's called slow fashion, so you're not looking to actually get the hottest style straight off the runway to someone. You're looking to let them design and develop their own product, develop a stronger affinity towards it, and ideally keep it for a longer time. Now, to execute on all that at scale, you actually have to focus on back-end supply chain, manufacturing, all of very basic execution-related things, which I think will create long-term differentiation and ideally position a business to change the narrative around how the fashion model works. Similarly, on the agriculture side, we're finding that it takes 8 barrels of oil to produce 1 cow. And 60% of the world's agricultural land is used for beef, although it accounts for only 2% of the calories that are consumed throughout the world. Combine that with the fact that we are wasting 1 inch of topsoil every year, and it takes nature 1,000 years to produce that 1 inch of productive soil. So according to the UN, they say that the world has only 60 years of harvest left before the soil can no longer support life. Now, obviously, we're hoping that various efforts are shifting and reversing this, but it's a pretty bleak picture if you look at it. Now, again, in that backdrop, to think about India's situation and think about the lack of quality product that we're producing on the food side. We've seen this already transpire in the US, where the growth of corn as a staple product due to the cheapness of its ability to be produced has basically turned that entire agricultural economy into a corn economy. In India as well, due to our inefficiencies in supply chain, we're actually in a very poor position in terms of the quality of produce that's coming out. Now, if you look at it, the supply chain results today in 32% of produce being wasted from the farmer to the end consumer. With just basic remapping of the entire supply chain, you can take that 32% wastage down to 1%. And there's a lot of technology and process that goes into that, but I can tell you that you're in this system, you're not only improving the yield that comes out of it, you're also improving the livelihood that you're enabling for a farmer. Now, also, as a result of all that, Waycool, which is a company I'm referring to here, is able to launch their own branded products to consumers that are actually higher in quality and better in nutrition at the same price point because they've been able to manage their yields more effectively. So here's a great example of integrating actual environmental and social considerations into a business model that's delivering good value for the consumers. Now, COVID has fundamentally accelerated underlying changes in consumer behavior. Whether it is a move towards virtual education, a move towards online purchasing, all of this has been accelerated just by virtue of sheer need. And we've seen this very much in the numbers. So if you look from 2014 to 16, we saw e-commerce penetration rates go from 0.8% to 1.8%. Over the next 3-year period, it went up to 3%. In the past 6-month period, or in the 6-month period of the first half of 2020, we saw it go up by 1.5% again. Certain verticals have gone up between 2 and 3x. So this has been the effect, and actually it's been billions of dollars of marketing that were perhaps saved as a result of some of this movement that was already present in the market, but just simply accelerated. So as we move forward in a post-COVID world, we believe that there's 2 immediate impacts that will be apparent. Hygiene is really the new security. Transparency will be the new trust. I think that there are 2 underlying trends that will surface over time, which is really provenance, knowing where your product came from and allowing for a premium for having it sourced from a place that consumers are happy with and want to buy from. And sustainability will really engender loyalty. These are longer term trends, but I think that they'll start to surface as well now. So as we think about companies, as we think about what we hold to be important, tech and brand are really the levers that businesses have to address the evolving consumer trends. Technology really allows for a business model to focus on thinking about distribution differently, to have scalability in it, to implement it in the production of the product, to allow you to create a differentiated product, and to really think about your customer acquisition costs differently so that you're using your marketing dollars in a more effective way. Brand and building the right type of brand, as we talked about with those various levers earlier, allows you to garner more market share and actually charge higher margins. So this is why we find these 2 parameters really important going forward. Now, tech in our model can range in terms of its impact or its implementation. You can have pure tech businesses, again, an ed tech platform, a used car marketplace like Vroom. These are pure tech businesses. Or you have tech-enabled businesses like Rebel Foods, which runs cloud kitchens and actually makes all the food that it sells, or Furlenco, which rents furniture and actually manufactures and owns the asset of the furniture. They are using tech and yet still creating products out there. So what we look for as we think about businesses is how these various models, so a marketplace model, access over ownership, making it easy, freemium, made on the internet, or subscription, can be mixed and matched in the right market to create an opportunity to address the consumer need in a differentiated way. And again, I'm happy to talk in more detail about any of these businesses or any in our portfolio that people would like to know more about. So in essence, as a fund, we're really investing in brands that leverage technology and emerging business models to sustainably shape the future of consumption in India. And the 4 foundational elements of it are technology, brand, business models, and sustainability. So that's kind of our thinking. And I wanted to just end on the note of saying that the data also proves that companies that are mindful of environmental, social, and governance issues have outperformed the index over a 3, 5, and 10-year period. And as Professor Serafine here has pointed out, it's not about understanding, it's not about implementing all of them at once in your business. It's about understanding which of the parameters your model has the best ability to impact and ultimately deliver results against. And if you can, it seems like your financial metrics will also follow suit. So that's all I had as a starting point. Rajat, I'll turn it back over to you, and I guess we can go from there.
Thanks, Sandeep. That was very, very useful. A lot of questions flowing in as you were talking about different things. So, one thing that you had mentioned when we were talking earlier, that you typically invest in 8 companies per fund, and you're very selective about which companies you invest. So I have a couple of questions around it. I'm going to break it into one question. So what is the right stage of reaching out to you? So there's Suraj who is asking about edtech startup he has funded, he has started and is looking for figuring out what is the right stage to reach out to you. There's Rohit who is also asking about automobile sector and your interest in that. But I think the first question is, what is the right stage? Like, do you invest at the idea stage? Do you want some proof point? If you want money coming in the company, profitable company, or unit economics positive, or what's the stage at which people should reach out to you?
Sure. So look, I think that we've invested across a range of stages. And I think the way we look at life is really risk versus return. And the reason I say that is, I'll give you an example. We invested in Melora when it was a PowerPoint presentation. This is a jewelry brand. We've invested on the flip side in Waycool, as I pointed out before, when they were doing, I think, about $35 million in annualized revenue. We invested $20 million there. We invested $4 million in, or $5 million in Melora when it started out. So I'd say it varies a bit, but I would say more general rule of thumb for us is more Series A to Series C range is where we are. Ideally, we'd like to see some semblance of a product. We'd like to see some traction on a metric that's deemed to be important in the business. Profitability is definitely not a metric for us. I'll tell you that we've lived through many businesses as they've taken their journey to profitability, so we're comfortable with that issue. But I think we're now at a point where, and it's funny, in our more general investor update, we talk about the idea that this time it's different. And this is the kind of refrain we've been using for the last 15 years. No, don't worry, this time it's different. And I do believe this time it's different. And I do believe now that there's a certain critical mass of scale of consumers that are available to everyone to be able to cost effectively and efficiently, with even friends and family money or seed capital, demonstrate some traction. So I would encourage people to get to some level of proving something, if not total product market fit, at least something on the metrics that gives them confidence to say that, look, I've got something here that's real, that evidences their unique understanding of the market, and then it's probably a good time for us to connect.
And what's the typical check size like?
So look, like I said, we've ranged between 2 million to 20 million as a first check. I would say the reality is it's probably more between 5 and 10 million is where we likely are as a first check. We would, over the course of a business's life, probably invest up to between 20 to 30 million. But we may start anywhere as low as 5.
So for someone like Suraj, who has an edtech startup making 10 lakhs of revenue a month, should he approach you?
Look, I'll put it this way. We will definitely take a look at it. It may be early for us. We have a pitch us section on our website. I'd also encourage that, look, the best way to get capital from an investor is really to develop a relationship and cultivate that, not necessarily to come on the day you need the capital and want it. And I think that there's a starting point of a discussion that can happen independent of being at the right stage per se. It might be a request to connect with somebody we know. It might be an opportunity to use our network in some way, all of which we're very happy to do. So I would say, yes, by all means, reach out, connect. We'll do our best to be thoughtful in terms of what we can do with it. If we can't, if it's not the right stage for us, we'll try to provide some feedback. And if it is feedback that you're actually soliciting, tell us that also. If it's not money, tell us what specifically you'd like some feedback on, and we'll focus at least our discussion or our response in that area.
Sounds great. So Suraj, you have your feedback. You can reach out to Sandeep for this. Another question from Rohit is about investment in automobile sector. I know you guys have invested in a city commute startup. I don't remember the name, but I believe you have done one already. But what's your broad thought process there?
So we've invested in a company called CityFlow. And CityFlow, I would tell you this, our overall investment thesis takes into account the idea that it's unique. And I think the uniqueness of India means that you have to be very careful and considerate about the manner in which you're going about solving problems. So let's look at daily commute. Daily commute in India is long, it's uncomfortable, it's often as long as a flight in many places. And I think that if you can reassess that and look at it differently, and what CityFlow did was actually say that, look, a normal bus commute is not attractive because the bus is not comfortable and the bus makes many stops, which actually delays the amount of time you take to get there. Now, coming back to the environmental and sustainable thought process, the mayor of Bogota said that the development of a city should be judged not by the number of people who have cars, but by the number of people that use public transport. And so with that ideology in mind, you think about what will it take to get more people to use public transport? Well, one, if I can make it as efficient and as convenient and as comfortable as alternate modes, I think that will probably go a long way towards it. And in parallel, if in the process I can remove vehicles from the road, I think that also helps. So CityFlow's model is predicated on the idea that there's high densities of people who live in one area and work in a similar area. So if you can focus on uh, those specific channels, let's say of travel, and ensure that you fill up a bus within 3 stops at the pickup point and empty it within 3 stops at the drop-off point, and no person is more than 300 meters from their spot, it seems like that would ideally be what would be a good way to address it. Further, you think about it, 70% of the traffic on the road today is made up of only 5 to 10% of the actual commuters, because these are the people in cars. So if you can shift these people into buses, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to have an impact on congestion as well. So all of these things came together with the underlying strength of a business model that actually makes a ton of sense. It's a lot of technology involved in actually running the mapping and the routing, a lot of technology involved in the reservation system, a lot of technology involved in how you fundamentally measure your assets and ensure the logistics are planned correctly. So all that gave us a sense of comfort that this was a business where not only could we get a good return on, develop an interesting environmental impact, but also use some of our skills to be helpful with.
Sounds great. So one other question that has come is, um, what portion of your deal flow you are seeing coming from tier two, tier three cities, and are you specifically making any effort to create an ecosystem or reach out to those ecosystems that are there in tier two, tier three, or not? Or is it
So
too early?
no, I'd say this. Look, we have over the course of the last couple of years learned a lot about tier two and tier three by virtue of the companies we're in. I'll give you an example. We have a business called Melora, which sells fine jewelry. The average selling price today is probably close to 30,000 rupees. And about 40% of our sales are actually taking place in tier two and tier three cities. And this was not necessarily by design, but if you do think about it, there is a lack of accessibility in those markets. Tanishq is only present in, I think, about 200 or 220 odd zip codes around the country, cities around the country. If you think about tier two and tier three as defined by the government survey information, it's after the first 150 odd cities that you could name. So we're really going beyond that. And that's where we are today with Melora. We're delivering to over 16,000 PIN codes around the country. We've reached villages and towns that you probably never would have considered or thought that we would reach. So all of that has influenced our thinking as well, to believe that there is massive opportunity to explore opportunities where simply access is an issue. And there's no brand incumbency in those markets. So there's an opportunity to do that. So now, given that, I don't have an answer as to whether, I'll put it this way, we haven't actually specifically outlined an opportunity to say, let's look at businesses that only target that. I think that all businesses should and can include that in what their market segment is. So far, I haven't necessarily evolved our thinking to say that there needs to be a very specific difference between how we consider what Bombay Shirt Company, let's say with personalized apparel, will do in a tier two or tier three city versus what they would necessarily communicate in a metro city, maybe language and those types of things aside. But fundamental model seems to be similar in nature. Maybe product range needs to look different and all that. But here again, I would say our thought process is to explore that through the lens of what our companies are doing. If we come across businesses, as we have, who have a larger presence there, I'd say we're very interested in exploring that and understanding what they have learned about it. Because I think at some point, as we talked about, the 1.3 billion people coming into consuming are going to come from all elements of this country. And knowing how you can achieve scale in addressing that market is going to be important to us. So not a specific focus, a short answer to your question, but a definite awareness of the need to think about it.
I think, in tier two, tier three, there's definitely a lot of aspirational customer living there. We in our business also see a lot of that happening. And there are two buckets of users specifically. One is your, 6 to 15,000 salary bracket guys, and the others are like 15,000 plus bracket guys. The 6 to 15,000 1,000 people add a lot of noise, increase your impressions, increase your volumes, but they don't really pay, primarily because they're really limited by the finances. But the 15 to 50K and beyond, these guys are very aspirational, looking for same kind of services that are available to tier one. And I guess,
Sorry, continue.
yeah, I guess those are the people that are coming and buying the products. Also, happen to visit some of these smaller towns. What I'm seeing is that there are small Thai chapters and there are small entrepreneur clubs, and there are people who have started doing courses online, with using some platform and all that. So a lot of the teachers, a lot of the people who are coming online on the platforms like Whitehead Junior, if you can name it, given all the controversy, um, those people are hailing from these cities. It's just that they're not creating the platform themselves right now. Maybe the overall ecosystem needs still development, still a lot of development.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So another question is on gender diversity. So much has been said in other countries about gender diversity in the companies, in the portfolio. Are there anything specific that you are doing there, or is it like literally? I do think that India is a little bit early to that, but are we? Have you started looking into those aspects as well?
Yeah, so I think you're cutting out a bit there at the end, but I think on the gender diversity issue, look, I think yes, it's an important aspect, and I think it's something that has to be mindful. We all have to be mindful of it and aware of it. I think that from our perspective right now, I think about 30% of our portfolio is led by women entrepreneurs. Yeah, about 30% is led by women entrepreneurs. And so I'm pleased that there's that at least, but I think that there's definitely more that we should probably be doing and thinking about as it relates to it. So look, I don't think that there's any model that's struck well to show us a path exactly what to do, but I do think it starts with an open conversation about it, a willingness to engage in discussions. We have been a part of panels talking about women entrepreneurs, looking at what it is that maybe their specific concerns that are different perhaps from male entrepreneurs, and seeing if we can think about how to address those and encourage more female entrepreneurs to actually enter the ecosystem and make sure that their opportunities are made available to them as well. So look, I think it's a great question, and I'm glad it's coming out as a question. And I think that over time, if there are participants in the audience or anybody else anywhere else who has specific ideas on how to think about it or what else we can be doing for it, I'm very happy to engage and continue to look at it.
Cool, very cool. So another question is from Ankit Jain. He's asking about your thesis on SaaS products for Indian MSMEs. So a lot of companies have raised a decent amount of funds in the recent year, couple of years, to go after this particular space. Although, and it's still a very early market, because we haven't seen much of monetization, at least from an outsider view or an entrepreneur view. We see that. But what is your take on that particular market overall?
So look, I think the MSME market in India is almost like a consumer market in many other countries in terms of size, fragmentation, scope. 50 plus million businesses in this world. They each have their own unique nuances, and I think that to generalize and make a broad statement that either it will generally work or not work is hard to say. I think that you have to look at each vertical in its own right and look at each solution in terms of what it's providing. I have currently found it hard. I found it hard to find a SaaS product that can cut across verticals effectively. So let's say a SaaS solution for the automotive industry may not work as well for the garment industry. And depending on what function you're going after, if you're going after, I don't know, ERP related things, or if you're going after supply chain related things, I think a lot of people are going after financing, whether it's working capital financing, various forms of invoicing, receivable management, of which there seems to be some uniformity to some degree, maybe driven more by the fact that banking is the common unifying issue in the middle that either is not operating efficiently or is the go-between that you have to go through. So I think that we definitely have to consider it. I think that I'll give you an example. Dunzo in our portfolio works very closely with Kirana shops. And in that, what we found is enabling them to be able to compete effectively with the larger e-commerce platforms with the premise of more effective or quicker convenience and delivery over time, ideally even better quality products by giving them the data that they need to stock the right things, is our approach perhaps to saying it's a SaaS type solution for a certain segment of an MSME market. But overall, I do think that there are going to be opportunities here. Again, the extreme inefficiency that exists due to the fragmentation there means that somebody can step in and be thoughtful about how they go about it. Like you pointed out, there have been companies that are getting funded around this. At least for us as a more consumer-focused fund, I would say it's second, sort of the second tier types of businesses we would think about. But to the extent that there's an approach that looks consumer in nature, which I think it should be, it can't be tons of feet on the street selling. I don't think it'll operate as efficiently. I think it's interesting to think about what could happen there.
And I think financing is probably because everyone went for a point of sale solution and then figured out that most of the transactions are happening on cash, and you're unable to monetize even 1%. So probably people switch to working capital financing to fund that. But on the keeping on the same topic, what's your view on the smoothing the supply chain of the these businesses? Because it seems that again a lot of there are a ton of supply chain issues. There is a lot of price discovery happening. People from different parts of the country will travel to the trading centers for various products. Like they'll come from Western UP to Delhi for buying masalas and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of that happening. So don't you think a horizontal company can really solve for that, at least the price discovery part, and not trying to make the actual delivery, which is what Udaan and other companies are getting into?
Look, I think our lessons from some of the full stack, let's call it, businesses that we've been in, and again, I'll refer to Rebel or Furlenco or Melora, is that no matter what you do on the consumer side, and actually Waycool is a great example of our journey in thinking about this. And maybe let me take a few minutes and just explain what we saw there. We looked a lot at the food business, and we looked a lot of brands at the front end that were either coming about in, let's say, snacks or drinks or anything of the sort. And I would say that most of them had done a phenomenal job of building some sort of brand identity. But ultimately, figuring out supply chain was something that they had reserved to, they had relegated to a shallow level to begin with, and then intended on getting deeper into that as they achieved a larger level of scale before they could actually have a real impact they felt there. Now, what that meant was, I think your ability to really control your supply chain understanding. So I think that you have to have that depth. So in the case of Furlenco, the depth of knowledge or the depth of control over how furniture is produced allows us to actually impact the yield that we generate on the furniture that we create. In the case of Waycool, the reason why the brands that we're able to put out there have higher quality at the same price point as competing products is because we control the supply chain. So to your point, I think that supply chain impact, and in any business that intends to actually deliver differentiated value to the consumer from the product that's being sold, they have to be willing to get their hands dirty in the supply chain. And so I think that that's essential. And so does that get done by a horizontal player who can think about it across various segments or through a vertical one? I would say that today, again, the supply chain for auto components is very different than the supply chain for potatoes. And so therefore, how one player can necessarily do that might not be as efficient. But similarly, there are large enough supply chains, such as agriculture, that are interesting enough to build independent companies in, that I think I would focus there. And so I think that I'm more of the opinion right now that let's get into very large markets with very large, distinct and unique opportunities that look somewhat homogenous, and try to influence how that supply chain works, rather than thinking about a horizontal supply chain that can work across many smaller markets.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So there is a question from Dhwani regarding your investments, if you have made any investments in sustainability space. I know your all your companies that you fund, they have sustainability and social issues at the core. Like, are they impacting that? But direct sustainability company, have you funded anything like that?
So look, this comes back to the statement I made earlier, and I've been on many panel discussions that talk about impact versus profit and everything else. I think we need to change our perspective on this. If we keep looking at them as two different things, saying, have you invested in sustainability or have you invested in for profit? It's like going back 15 years ago and saying, are you investing in a mobile company? And it's sort of like, look, every company needs mobile as a part of their strategy. I think every company needs to think about sustainability as a part of their core business. It's not a afterthought. It's not and it's one that, again, is not coming from this just altruistic desire to save the world and make it a better place. Look, I have two kids. I want to leave the world a better place for them and all that, but I also have investors in our fund that demand certain returns. And I don't think I have to be at odds in how I address both of those needs, because otherwise I don't think I would be able to live in general, because both are important to me. So, yeah. And I do think that that's how I look at the world. So the short answer to Dhwani's question is yes, we have, and in fact, all our businesses are that, and all our businesses going forward will continue to be that, and we will continue to find ways to emphasize that further and grow that deeper. And no, we won't look at just pure sustainable businesses where there is no business model that can deliver the financial return. So that's the other side of it as well.
So continuing with the the social aspect of the business, there is this entire sector around assistive technologies, right? And have you evaluated any company in that particular space? There's one question on that as well. And part of me feels, when I was in US, companies will go after these niche spaces because you can still make, $50 million, $100 million company. But in India, given that there are such large level of inefficiency across everything, as entrepreneurs, we haven't really been able to focus much on those niche opportunities. So there are some passionate people around who are doing some work there, but at least I haven't seen anything of scale from in the news or anything. Have you seen anything there, or have you evaluated any company, and what has been your thought process there?
So look, the short answer is no. We haven't evaluated specific companies, none that have at least progressed to the point where I could speak to it with any depth in that matter. I will say this though, that and again, I'm assuming we're saying people that have some sort of a challenge in some way that needs assistance. I'll give you this, that I'll say from our standpoint, we have looked very deeply at mental health. And I think that mental health, whether you classify that as assisted for in the category of trying to help people do the same things that other people are doing, I think perhaps it is. I think that we've learned in our journey so far that um, moderate to severe mental disorders are extremely debilitating. India has a massive base of people that commit suicides every year. We have a large base of people that are suffering from depression. I think this is really impacting their ability to contribute to society. I think mental disorders have historically been considered untreatable, which is untrue. And I think the fact that with the right type of medication and the right type of support from a community around you, you can in fact become a healthy contributing member of society. And I think that that's an area that we are learning more about, getting deeper into, and we'll be very excited to actually engage in, because I feel like these are people in society that have every reason and opportunity to contribute and can be very strong contributors. And the only thing standing in the way, quite honestly, is the solutions to be able to address them. And by the way, most countries rely on government funds to help manage these issues. India's government spend on healthcare in general is abysmally low. And then you narrow that down to mental health, and it's pretty much negligible. I think that it's probably under $4 or $5 million per year that's getting spent in just mental health. So I would say that even a $5 million investment in a business in this space would probably be significantly more than just what's currently being considered in this area. So yeah, so the short answer is, look, that has been an area that we've gone into. If we're talking about necessarily enabling websites to be more handicap friendly in some manner, shape, or form, we haven't done enough there. And again, I think this falls back on everybody else and within us and the community in general to think about how to prioritize that. This again falls in the category of social awareness is important. And if you start doing this from the beginning, I think you'll be well ahead of regulation that may mandate it over time. And the incremental cost using technology for this can't be significant. And I think the question is a great one that then I will definitely consider taking back to our team and thinking a little bit more about how can we encourage our businesses to perhaps integrate this in their thought process.
Very cool. So everyone, talks about the successes they have. And Navjot here wants to know more about the failures that you've had. Like, the specific question is, can you tell us about where you have been proven wrong in terms of your investment? So let's talk about. I'm pretty sure you have some companies in the area. So
I think we might need another 2 hours for this conversation.
Yeah.
Honestly, the failures are what make us. And I think that my failures started very young in life, in the sense that I started my first company back in '99 along with a friend, where we wanted to build at that point what we called a digital locker, which was this is, again, you have to remember, pre-iPod days, and many on this call might not know what an iPod is, but just think of it like an iPhone that couldn't make a phone call.
Yeah.
And so this was pre then, where MP3 players were the rage, and we felt that 3G networks were going to evolve, and we wanted to build this locker in the sky. The cloud hadn't even come about, and we were going to host all your personal music and pictures and video games, and that was our desire. And we actually were incubated by Sony Music, so we felt we had the great partner. Sony at the time, remember, was pre-Apple being what it is today, probably in the best position to take control of a device media environment. They own Sony Electronics, they own Sony Pictures, they own Sony Music. So we were sitting in the ideal place, and the whole thing failed miserably. You couldn't get the left hand and the right hand to work together, and within Sony, we just spent days trying to make that happen. There was a motivation that had driven Sony to incubate our business, which was born out of the idea that they thought they could exit it quickly, because this was the dot-com boom of '98, which again, many people on this call may not even know about. But suffice it to say, it looks a lot like the Sensex boom of today, where things went up somewhat irrationally and went down equally irrationally. So again, something to be aware of. So I would say that, look, it was a tremendous failure, and bam, we just fell flat on our face. There was no ability for us to access rights. And about a year and a half later, Apple came out with the iPod. They came out with one of the most amazing ads, I would say, ever, with a silhouette set of ads that really spoke to the passion of engaging with their product. It had these, and for anybody who hasn't seen it, I would highly recommend look up iPod silhouette ad. You'll see it was in 2003 that they came out with it. Very, very provocative, engaging, spoke to the emotion of engaging with music, and that kind of changed the entire trajectory. So boom, first failure. Next one came a couple of years later, again, working with a food business, doing reverse logistics. Sorry, we were doing sourcing, reverse auctions for the food industry, trying to aggregate indirect purchase items. And again, I can talk to you about the rationale. The reality was we were trying to help businesses save money. And in a market so focused on growth, which pretty much every market is around tech, saving money is the sort of afterthought and the evil stepchild, I think, there. Why are you wasting my time on this nonsense? Nobody asks me about my margin. Everyone asks me about my top line. And by the way, I go do all my purchasing with XYZ every weekend, and he takes me out to play golf. So why am I going to change that? And so again, massive learning in terms of failing within that. But look, quite honestly, these failures very much drove a lot of my thought process going forward. My bias against investing in media companies today is driven heavily by the navigation or the lack thereof success of navigation I had there. I think it's hard, and I don't know that I'm well equipped to, and I probably bring too much baggage with it. My concern around business models that are structured around just saving people money without delivering enough alternative benefits to growing or expanding their business colors some of how I think about stuff today. In terms of pure investments we've made as a fund, those have mostly ended up being challenging because of a lack of correct read on the entrepreneurs we're working with, and a lack of understanding on how we were going to navigate the future world together, which is why I think as we go forward, and one of the core parts of our investment process is we never issue a term sheet with just financial terms. We now write a very in-depth letter. And even, by the way, if we spent enough time with your business to opt not to invest, we send you the same in-depth letter that talks about our understanding of your business and our understanding of where we think you need to, or we believe the business will go from here. And ensuring that alignment from the beginning is our effort to now make sure that if there are any problems before we invest, we're on the same page. And if they're just read that letter, and so much is said over the course of the months that we get to know people that you may just feel and believe, and so much pitching is done and so much selling is done. Once we're in the business, we're all on the same side, and suddenly it's no more about selling. It's really now about debating. And we want to bring that out as upfront as possible. So that's how we've tried to balance ensuring that we've learned from the failures of the years. By the way, we also maintain a document as an aside, which is probably now, I don't know, maybe a 15-page document of lessons learned. And we just keep adding to it forcibly every time we raise a fund. But now actually we try to maintain it on a more regular basis every time we learn something.
Is that publicly available, or is it internal only?
I think it's a great question. I think we should start making it publicly available. So one of my colleagues, I'm sure, is on this call and listening in, and I think we'll take note of looking at how we can actually put that out there, because they're very useful. And look, our sole role, lots of people talk about investors as mentors. I really don't subscribe to that idea. All I subscribe to is the fact that we've had a certain set of experiences that are unique and that many people may not have had the opportunity to see in a certain way. And I think the onus is upon us to bring that to the people that we work with, and ideally at a broader level to bring that to the entire ecosystem, to let everybody take what they want from it. And I think if we can open source that, it's a great thought.
I think even a lot of entrepreneurs will benefit from that thought process, because ultimately, when you're building a business from scratch, you're looking for different kind of frameworks to think through every new problem that gets thrown at you. So it will be good to see that particular point of view as well, as to how you guys think about it and what you learned, and maybe some things that as an entrepreneur we can avoid.
So I'll tell you this, cool. We have a section on our website, just to add on that, one last point. We have a section on our website called New Thinking. And in that, what we do publish is regular views on spaces that we're exploring. And what I will at least promise taking away from this as my action item is to go back and see if we can add something in that area as lessons learned, so that we publish it in some sort of regular format and not just a one-off, but maybe ensure that we're getting that information out on a consistent basis. And so that will at least be a place where if anyone's listening, they can look for it, and to whatever extent they want our views on spaces, they can see that as well there.
That will be awesome. Sandeep, I think we can go for next 2 hours, but we have Sunil who has just joined, and we'll probably switch to other. I also have a lot of questions on the panel that are still coming in. We'll probably I'll talk to Thai team about how we can maybe funnel to you and get a answer to those people as well. I'm sorry, guys, but keep your questions coming for the next person on the panel. So thank you, Sandeep. Thanks a lot for giving your hour to get your diverse view on different topics from SaaS to failure to how to think about sustainable and sustainability in terms of building a business. Lovely to have you.
Thank you, and guys, thanks for the opportunity to share this. And look, we're very interested in engaging. So you can email me directly at sandeep@lifebox.vc. And like I said, we have our thoughts on new thinking, and we'll have a podcast soon where we'll share more views. So we'd like more ways to engage. So anything we can do to be helpful, we'd love to. And Rajat, thank you for a great conversation. It was very nice talking here.
Thank you, Sandeep. Bye.